Gurmaga to Las Corla. Minister, thanks for taking this question at the last minute, and I don't think you're responsible for this area, but you may be well familiar with it as a minister in the Green Party who should and would, I think, have an interest in developing public transport systems to take cars off the road, to decarbonise our economy and to improve public transport. And so, in general, I want to start by saying I'm not opposed to the BusConnects system in principle. If it improves public transport and encourages people to get out of their cars, all the better. But the problem we have is the actual results of the new routes that are being implemented. And this is not the revolution that we were promised in bus transport. And unfortunately, I believe we're seeing negative aspects and impacts on passengers, on communities, and particularly on vulnerable cohorts within those communities. So in my own constituency, in the latest phase of BusConnects in Dublin 10 and 12, they've just scrapped the old routes of the number 18 and 17. You may have heard discussion on the radio about it, and replaced them with the S2 and the S4 and a new route, the 74. And like many other phases in the BusConnects plan, the routes are not exactly the same, and people accept that. But the claim made by the National Transport Authority and BusConnects that these new routes will give people better and wider access to more locations and more frequency really has to be challenged. So some people will now have to transfer on 2 and 3, sometimes 3 buses to make a journey that they used to make on one bus. For example, to get from Ballyfermot to St. Louis College in Rathmines, the 18 used to take you there, or to get from parts of Crumlin to Sandymount or to a job that you might have near Ballsbridge. You now have to make 2 or 3 different connections. And that would be fine if the theory that these would be more efficient, more plentiful, and the transfers would be easy and smooth and timely and all the rest of it actually worked. But this is not true. I wish it was true, but it's not true. And it's not just a teething problem that can be ironed out, because huge numbers of people are being stranded and facing longer delays, longer commutes, and for children and elderly people, this is particularly difficult. So in Dublin 12 and Dublin 10, there's no direct link between Ballyfermot and Rathmines or Crumlin and Ballyfermot, and school children who can't easily move from their schools are in particular being affected. I know some parents writing to me, particularly about St. Louis and Rathmines, where the kids have to try and get 2 buses or a combination of 3. But whatever journeys they take, the times that they have to travel have been dramatically increased under this new routing. And one of the great claims made by Sir Jared Walker when he devised the BusConnects plan was that people would be able to access wider parts of the city than ever before. And in theory, of course, this is true. But what about people who need to actually go to the places that they work in, or actually go to the places that they regularly travel to for education or other things, and are really just discombobulated by this? And I've appealed time and time again to the NTA to provide direct links, even on a periodic basis, to compensate those considerable numbers of people affected. And if we do want to make the changes in transport in terms of our climate goals and in terms of changing public transport and making the city a better place to live, we cannot leave large numbers of people behind. It's very damaging to the idea that public transport is the alternative and the future for many people. But we've seen it happen repeatedly in areas like Chapel Islet. That's a growing village with many more people moving into it, and the services have been cut to bits. And we're seeing it happen, as I just name-checking them, in places like Crumlin, Ballyfermot and Drimnagh.
Thank you, Las Corla, and thank you, Deputy Bríd Smith, for raising this issue, which I'm taking on behalf of Minister Ryan. So from the outset, I just want to clarify that the Minister for Transport has responsibility for policy and overall funding in relation to public transport, but neither the Minister nor his officials are involved in a day-to-day operation of public transport services. The statutory responsibility for securing the provision of public passenger transport services nationally rests with the National Transport Authority, and the NTA works with the public transport operators who deliver the services and who have responsibility for day-to-day operational matters. That said, I want to reassure the Deputy that the Government is strongly committed to providing all citizens with reliable and realistic sustainable mobility options, and public transport plays a key role in the delivery of the goal. To support this objective, in Budget 2023, Department of Transport received €563 million of funding for public service obligation and TFI local link services, and that was an increase from €538 million in 2022. More recently, under the new Budget 2024, a funding package of €613 million has been secured for public service obligation and local link services. This includes funding for the continuation of the 20% reduction in fares on PSO services, the young adult card on both PSO and commercial bus services, and the 90-minute fare until the end of 2024. Funding has also been secured to support new and enhanced bus and rail services next year. And as the Deputy will be aware, the Government is committed to improving public transport, both bus and rail, and is backing up that commitment with significant investments across the network, and this includes the continued rollout of BusConnects. The latest phase of the BusConnects network redesign in Dublin, Phase 5B, commenced on the 26th of November, and it involved the introduction of new Southern Orbital, radial and local routes. The S2, 74 and L25 routes are operated by Dublin Bus, and the S4, S6, S8, W2 and L55 routes are operated by Go Ahead Ireland. Phase 5B represents an increase in service levels of approximately 80%, which makes it one of the most significant changes under the network redesign to date. With the introduction of these new services, as of the 26th of November, routes 17D, 18, 61, 75A, 76A and 175 all ceased operation. I understand that information booklets were delivered to households in the areas that are affected by the launch of the latest phase of BusConnects programme, and an extensive media and public relations campaign has begun. With respect to the specific queries regarding issues with the new BusConnect services in Dublin 10 and 12, it's important to note that UCD will be now served by new orbital routes S4 and S6, which will run every 10 minutes and every 15 minutes respectively. Other existing routes, such as the 39A, 46A, 145 and 155, are going to continue to run. Route S4 provides a direct connection via Clonskea to Milltown for the Lewis Green Line, and then to Rathgar and Terenure for connections with high-frequency services on routes 14, 15, 15A, 15B and 16. These connections are either new or much more direct than the current Route 17, which loops southward between UCD and Terenure. Route S4 then continues via Crumlin to Ballyfermot and Liffey Valley. Route S6 continues to provide the connection to Dundrum, but at higher frequency than Route 175, and then onwards via Rathfarnham to give new direct connections with Templeogue and Firhouse Road and on to Tala. I want to reassure Deputy Smith that the Department of Transport, the NTA and the operators are working to ensure the optimised deployment of resources across the public transport network to match changing passenger demand patterns. Thank you.
The problem we have really is that all of that sounds great on paper, and the data may turn up to show that things are improving and the capacity is improving. And I do know, for example, that the late night buses are a big attraction, and the capacity on them has really improved, and people are taking them up, and some of the routes are, definitely better. But we're still dealing with a lot of traffic congestion in this city. For example, yesterday evening I travelled to the Phoenix Park. It took me an hour and a half to go 5 kilometres to go to the protests at the Ambassador's residence. Crazy, I should have walked. But nevertheless, that just gives you an example of how bad traffic congestion is, and buses get caught up in that because we haven't seen the infrastructure and the improvements in bus lanes that are required to make BusConnects the great success that it's meant to be. It's like having trains out without the train tracks. You get all these trains, you've no tracks to put them on. And so, for the moment, for an awful lot of people, it's a pure disaster. And particularly for people doing regular journeys, as I said earlier on, to school, to work, to access the village so that they can shop or socialise. But I've also real concerns in the way that the National Transport Authority effectively run Dublin Bus and Go Ahead and track their performance, so they can produce all this data that looks good on paper. But the reality for the passenger, the experience is very, very different than the data produced by the NTA. So supposedly a bus that's meant to operate every 12 minutes, but in reality they have gaps of about an hour, because at peak times, because of the issues I've just mentioned, the corridors and the traffic congestion, because of the NTA's key performance indicator, the driver comes along, people have been waiting for an hour instead of 12 minutes, and he's expected to wait at every bus stop until exactly the time that he's meant to leave. And if that doesn't happen, then the companies, both Dublin Bus and BusConnects, are fined very heavily by the NTA. So you have companies running bus services, and what they're really doing is watching the level of fines instead of looking at the service that they should be delivering to the passengers that are waiting on the streets.
Thank you, Lascan Corda and Deputy. You mentioned Jared Walker, and I remember, I think probably back in 2016, meeting him with other councillors, and there's been an extensive period of consultation to try to figure out how do you make a better bus route. A lot of our bus routes in Ireland are based on the original tram routes, and in fact not electric trams but horse-drawn trams, and they even have the same route numbers and stops, and the stages that are on the bus routes are actually stages where the horses could get some water. So really we have a very, very traditional set of routes, bus routes in Dublin, which don't reflect the population densities and the new communities that have grown up around. So we did need to reorganise our bus routes, and I think you probably accept that. And I think you understand as well that when you change around the bus routes, even when you add extra services, that there are going to be people who are inconvenienced and don't have a direct route where they had a direct route before. But there are also many people, and you want to make sure that what does happen is that there are far more people who are getting a better service. And so I can point out, for example, that on orbital routes to and from UCD, that they are increasing. That previously that the peak levels with routes 17 and 175 had 5 services an hour in each direction, but now with the introduction of S4 and S6, they are doubled to about 10 services per hour. And it should also be noted that communities will now benefit from a direct connection to UCD for the first time. So with the S4, these include Long Mile Road, Crumlin Hospital, Ballyfermot, Cherry Orchard, Rathgar and Milltown. And on the S6, these new communities include Fairhouse Road, Cherryfield and Templeogue, areas which up to now had a direct connection to UCD, which will require an interchange from November 26th, include City West, Ballyboden, Knockline and parts of Fairhouse. And as you point out, there is a problem with traffic congestion, and infrastructure changes are needed and are the second part of this project, so they certainly have to happen. And the real-world performance of the project has to continue to be monitored. So it's not enough to say that you have so many services per hour in the timetable. They've only recently been deployed, but we do need to watch the performance data to see that the services are actually delivering what they're meant to.